word you use?
Spoilers.
Spoilers. Spoilers. Spoilers. Spoilers. Spoilers. I like that word.
I thought you might.
Hello everyone, so it's been a while, but welcome back to another Missing Presumed Lost and the second part in my Daleks Master Plan review. If you haven't watched the first part, please go and watch that first, and also my standalone review of The Feast of Stephen to catch up. After the comedy of The Feast of Stephen, it does feel somewhat odd to slip back into purely sci-fi territory, but in terms of pacing, this actually works very well for the story, which felt rather slow in the first half. Because you see, it puts the audience on the back foot, with the death of Katerina in episode 4 seeming like the most surprising and shocking moment of the story so far. The remaining episodes pull no punches and show that, as the First Doctor would later go on to say, it's far from being all over. As I mentioned in the previous part of my review, the first half of this story does very much feel like a setup to everything that happens in the second half. And boy, do things kick off quickly. We're treated to the surprise return of the monk, an Egyptian adventure, and even more death and destruction. However, it can't be ignored that because of the overall length of this story and the build-up to these moments in the first half, it does leave the conclusion feeling, well, a little bit anticlimactic. Not in a way that doesn't make it worth watching, but I just feel if you're going to sit down and watch this all in one sitting, you might get to the end and feel that for a story of such length, maybe there could have been a bit more. That being said, however, I think part of the reason is because The Feast of Stephen takes place slap bang in the middle of this story. Whilst it's a great one, because such a light-hearted episode breaks up an overall quite dark sci-fi story, it does feel that perhaps the full story deserved that one more episode that The Feast of Stephen was taking up. But it got me thinking, if you decided to forego The Feast of Stephen when watching the Daleks Master Plan, might it improve the structure and pacing of the main story? It's not something I've done myself, but I may well consider doing it for a future rewatch. As mentioned in part 1 of this review, there isn't a whole lot of trivia surrounding this story, but rather like the death of Katerina in part 1, there was one other piece of trivia that did jump out at me. As many of you will know, it was a regular occurrence for the BBC to offer programmes like Doctor Who for overseas distribution. However, of all the 1960s stories, Mission to the Unknown and the Daleks Master Plan were never purchased by any other countries. As such, this does mean that the likelihood of there being other copies out there in the world waiting to be found is drastically reduced. However, as previously mentioned in my Feast of Stephen review, that particular episode of the Daleks Master Plan was never made available for overseas sales, and as such, it has become one of the first Doctor Who episodes to be confirmed to be completely lost in its original visual format. However, this does raise the point that it's likely that some copies of the 16mm black and white film tele-recordings were prepared in advance in expectance of overseas sales. So whilst it's less likely that there are any copies overseas, and in fact if there were any 16mm black and white film tele-recordings made, they were most likely wiped, it is still possible that perhaps somewhere in the UK, copies of the Daleks Master Plan international distribution tapes still exist, waiting to be found. Now, in the first part of my Daleks Master Plan review, I said I was going to wait off the Reconstruction Rating until this episode, and if you've seen my Feast of Stephen review, you'll know that I said the Feast of Stephen absolutely should get a reconstruction. So should the rest of the Daleks Master Plan? Yes, of course it should. But given its popularity and demand amongst fans for an animated reconstruction, should it be given priority over other animated reconstructions? In my personal opinion, no. Now let me be clear again, it certainly does deserve an animated reconstruction, but as one of the single longest Doctor Who stories with 9 out of 12 episodes missing, well, that's a lot to animate. And speaking personally, I know that I would rather have other partly missing or completely missing shorter stories animated first, and then keep the Daleks Master Plan, so it would be the classic series animated reconstruction swan song. Now, I know this means that many fans would have to wait longer for it than they would like to, but wouldn't it be nicer to have a constant stream of animated reconstructions finishing with the Daleks Master Plan, rather than having the Daleks Master Plan take precedence and having to wait even longer for other animated reconstructions? So, the Daleks Master Plan overall, a classic among classics, or a good, but overrated story? Well, I gotta be perfectly honest, for me, it's a bit of both. As a classic Doctor Who story, it's got a bit of everything. Comedy, drama, science fiction, contemporary settings, and certainly memorable moments. But that being said, this story does seem to have gained a reputation as being one of the all-time greats. And whilst I don't dispute that it's a good story, if you look at all the official rankings of Doctor Who stories there have been over the years, the Daleks Master Plan actually receives fairly low billing, usually not even making it into the top 50. And with many fans, myself included, having never seen this story in its original full live-action form, it does make me wonder how many people repeat that it's a fantastic story because that's what they've been told, or even how many fans have actually seen it in any form. Regardless of that, however, if you've seen it before, then it's a great one to re-watch, and if you've never seen it before, then it's certainly worth seeing. But as I've done for this review, my personal recommendation would be to use The Feast of Stephen as a breaking point, because unless you're planning to watch the whole thing all the way through from start to finish, then it is a lot to get through. But that brings to a close another Review Who Missing Presumed Lost. As always, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Like, favorite, subscribe, share, it really helps me out a lot. Be sure to check out the description below for a link to my Patreon. I'm doing my very first figure animation and you can get involved. There is exclusive content and rewards for those who do so, and funding my Patreon in any way gets your name at the end of my videos. I salute you all, and I will see you with another video very soon.